Hey everyone, this is Matt Kingman, your very handsome host of NonProfit on the Rocks and ridiculously smart co-founder of Envision Consulting, which is a national consulting company working with nonprofits on recruiting and strategy. And with us for now is Ashley Waterton, our producer, because Ashley, you now got yourself a puppy and you're crazy.
Okay, so just so we're clear on our adjectives, you are ridiculously handsome, intelligent, and humble, of course, whereas I am crazy, right? Is that where we are on the adjectives? And you know what? That's fair. All of that is fair. And yes, we have a 12-week-old yellow lab puppy. He is ridiculously cute as long as we're going with the adjective thing. But yes, I had forgotten, or maybe because I haven't had a puppy since I was like 15 and my mom was really the one in charge, just how much work a puppy is. It's like back to having an infant. It's just constant. It's a good thing he's cute. I'll just put it that way.
Here's my question for you, crazy lady. So your kid is finally of that age where you can send him to school and you can calm down and like you don't have like a crazy household, you have the time to yourself, and then you're like, well, it's time for me to have more poop in the house, so I'm gonna get myself a puppy.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. It was like life started seeming just a little too easy, Matt. It was just getting a little too easy, a little too dull, and we thought we're past childbearing age. What can we do to really just ramp things up again? And we thought a puppy was a good idea.
So I do have a question though for you in all seriousness, Ashley. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm sitting down. I feel like this is a sitting down question.
Okay. If you felt like your life needed something, in it to do, I'd like to know why the podcast doesn't fulfill you as it fulfills me.
You know what it is, Matt? It's the insanity. I plead insanity, as you identified correctly at the beginning of the podcast. There's really no other explanation because everything you're saying is so on point.
Okay. I want our listener to know that the reason why there's only one of you out there is because our producer just doesn't care enough, just doesn't have the love of the show and just doesn't care. So that's why when she created the Instagram account that we have, she put in so many dashes because
Is that it? I like how you found a way to tie this conversation to the amount of underscores in our Instagram account because it had just been too long. I mean, it had been a full 6 minutes before you had brought up the amount of underscores in our Instagram account. So really nice job with the segue.
Don't worry. I'm going to talk about the fact that I ran a homeless shelter in New Jersey. That's going to happen.
That actually does come up in this episode with Tamika Farr, who is the CEO of Pathways and is our guest on today's show.
Funny thing, by the way, about Tamika Farr is that I've known her and of her for years until she finally took my call and finally allowed me to get her interested to apply to Pathways. So I love her. I adore her. She's an amazing director, amazing CEO, so smart, so badass, just really the perfect guest for this show.
One thing you talk about is that just worked out so fortuitously for everyone that Pathways was looking, that Tamika finally stopped screening her calls and took the call and is now working for Pathways. And it's also another example of why what Envision does is so awesome, because that's exactly what you guys do. You connect awesome organizations with badass leaders.
And I think just as a reminder to our listener out there, if you do get a call or an email or a text or a LinkedIn from a recruiter, take it because you literally never know.
Even if you're totally happy where you are, it just doesn't hurt. And as Tamika even said, you may know somebody else who's perfect for it that you could connect. So you could be that person who changes someone else's life if it's not your own. So definitely take that call.
Yep. And before we let our listener into this episode, is there anything else, Ashley, that you'd like to share?
Does anyone have any recommendations for some really good like odor remover, or how do you get your dog to stop chewing all your furniture?
I think the answer is put your dog up for adoption.
Remove its teeth. I mean, there are some good suggestions, but here's an even better suggestion. We're going to sign off so our listeners can hear this great interview with Tamika Farr, CEO of Pathways LA.
Hello, my friend Tamika Farr. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Excited to be on the show and to have the opportunity to reconnect with you. Always a good time.
Do you want to tell our listener, our one listener out there, what you told me when I asked you if you've ever listened to this show before?
No, I don't. Well, what I said is I had not had the opportunity. However, I look forward to listening to my show.
Mm.
But I trust you, and everything that you do is so insightful and lively and vibrant. But I trust that every interview you've done before me is lovely.
Good way to start by buttering off the host. So, before we start, what are you drinking, my friend?
Sparkling water for now. My husband is ready whenever I say the word to run in with a margarita. So
Okay. I've been like off bourbon for a while, but for you, I decided I'm gonna drink some more. So, cheers to you.
cheers.
Cheers.
So bourbon, I've just started to drink whiskey. I don't know, a few years ago at a party, somebody brought a bottle and I was like, hey, why not? But to me, it's heavy for the summertime. When it's already warm outside, so that prompts like margarita weather. But as soon as it starts to cool down, yes, whiskey and bourbon is my go-to as well.
I am going to like educate you in bourbon. So when you're ready, you're gonna come over to my house. I'm gonna whip out like my 18,000 bottles of bourbon.
Yes.
Okay.
I would love that. When I came to your office and I saw you had a little bar in your office, I was like, this is the life I want to live. Why? I need to go into recruiting.
Yeah. Yet another reason why potential clients who listen to the show are like, wait, we can't hire this guy. He's got a bar in his office. I am going to tell you what is a really good drink in the summer, a really good drink that people don't ever think about, but I just got back from Italy, so I think about it now, is a limoncello spritz. Have you ever had that?
No, it sounds refreshing though.
It's so good. It's limoncello, which is beautiful. Prosecco and soda. So
nice.
Yeah.
Sounds refreshing. Yeah. We have a couple of more weeks of 100-degree weather, so it's not too late.
But there's no global warming, none, no global warming
not at all.
So I want everybody to know, we placed you at an organization called Pathways LA. And the first time that we were doing this search, which I want to say was like maybe 2015, somewhere around there, you turned me down. I reached out to you, turned me down. And then this last time, a year and a half ago, you were like, okay, fine, you've worn me out, I'll apply. So one thing that I think is important for folks to listen and for you to tell them, when a recruiter reaches out to you, and you even may not be interested, right? Why should you return their call?
Why should you return the call, even if you're not interested? You would say it's the professional thing to do, to at least have a conversation, even if you're not looking. Maybe there's someone that you know that would be interested in the position, and to just get more information, because we all like to network and get to know one another. It's a relationship that can be built. So for no other reason, someone would miss out on having a relationship with Matt, right? So it's a networking opportunity. You just never know when things in your life are going to shift, or things in your colleagues' lives or friends' lives. And this is just a resource for you going forward, even if it doesn't work out at that time.
And I mean, I think anytime that I reach out to people, they should respond. I agree. So I'm going to tell you a story I don't think I ever told you. So Allison and I were doing the interview for Pathways LA the first time around when you so unkindly rejected me. And this woman came in to interview, right? She came into our office and we were like, why do you want to work at Pathways? And she started talking about an organization called Pathways in Orange County. And you're in Los Angeles County. Yeah. So she came all the way up there for a waste of time because it was a totally different organization that she didn't even bother doing the research on. So what that goes to show everybody is when you are applying for a job, maybe just take a look at the organization.
I absolutely agree. I am a member of Guidestar, which I think you can look up information there for free, but I even pay so that I can dig a little deeper. So sometimes at night when I can't sleep, I look up organizations and look at their financials. It's my pastime to research organizations, what they're doing, what their impact is, who their funding sources are. So yes, if you can't do that for a job you're applying for, it may not be a good time for you to be seeking new employment.
You know what? I think that's actually a really cool thing that you just mentioned, because we haven't talked about it on any of the episodes of the show. So Guidestar.
Sorry to interrupt, Matt and Tamika, but it seems like you're about to Matt-splain our audience about Guidestar. Let's cue the music.
So Guidestar is a website. It's a resource where nonprofits have to file their tax return. So do you want to tell folks, since you're the pro, what is it that people can find on a 990? What can they find on a tax return on Guidestar?
Yeah, it provides, to me, a snapshot of the organization's financial security, if you will. And there's a lot of things that can happen in a year that can impact an organization's financials, but then you can even go to the audit and then look at the notes to see what happened, so there's a lot of things that could potentially be out of an agency's control, but it gives you a snapshot of what their operating expenses are, how much they pay for program expenses, over administrative cost, if they own their properties, if they pay their board members, which nonprofits normally don't. But you can look at historical data, so it'll give you comparative information for the current year and the previous year, so you can see if they are increasing in revenue or if there's been some dip in some regard. So it's, finding the story of an organization.
Thanks so much for your help with that Matt-splained Tamika Farr, CEO of Pathways LA. And now back to the interview.
My favorite thing on a 990 that you didn't mention is salary information, because that's on there too.
I know, I didn't want people to know that.
So I was having a conversation with my mom, actually, like a week ago, true story. And she was talking about these nonprofits that she funds. And I was like, hey, let me just look at their 990s. Let me tell you if I think it's worth funding. And one of the nonprofits she funds is maybe it's a $3 million nonprofit, maybe 5, not very much. They pay their CEO $745,000 a year.
Can I work there? Me and my husband will work. 2 of us, 2 for 1 salary.
$745,000. So here's my question for you. You poke around Guidestar, you find this organization, you look at that salary. Do you give to that organization?
I wouldn't give to that organization because the ratios are considerably off, right? So I don't know, is that 30% of what the agency raises goes to the executive director? Now, on the flip side of that, my very first job was with an organization where the operating budget was $500,000, right? And so I was getting paid, say, maybe $80,000. So when you look in that regard, it's a small organization. So you have to invest in leadership if you're investing in growth. But when you're looking at an organization of that magnitude, I just think the ratios are off. And also potentially looking at the fundraising requirements of the CEOs, like maybe if they're raising all 3 million, possibly, right? So, but if it's a government funded organization and they are not responsible for generating revenue, I don't think I would give to that organization.
100%. So I told my mom, I was like, hey, by the way, this is happening. And she was like, well, he does good work and I don't really care. I'm still going to give. And I was like, okay, whatever you want. So it is really fun to look at Guidestar. So anybody who's listening, if you don't know about it, go online and look up guidestar.org. It's fun. It's fun to look at tax returns. I like it. And I also don't think that CEOs are making enough money, especially when people do look at tax returns and they really think about it. So what do you think in terms of salary? What do you think should be like a benchmark for nonprofits to pay?
It's hard to say, but at my organization, we do have an annual salary survey where we look at the salaries and how we're paying our staff and how that compares industry-wide. And we do our best to make sure that we're paying competitively because turnover is expensive. And we do appreciate our staff. They work hard, they're passionate, they're committed to the organization. So we want to be a leader in that regard and not say it's a nonprofit like we're glorified volunteers. You know, we live in LA County. We want to make sure that people can pay their rent. But what I look at, even when I'm negotiating my own salary, is the size of the organization, like the operating budget, the number of staff members that are employed with that organization, and the funding source. And so there's a lot of different information that you can gather that can support your argument one way or the other, right? So I can pull information that says that I should have a $150,000 salary, and I can also pull information that says, a $300,000 salary. It's there because, like you said, you also are influenced by organizations where the CEO is getting 700,000. So the average of that, can be pretty high. So, I just do my best to gather a wide range and a large scale of information so that we're making the best choice. And even just, currently we're looking at the agency and our paying practices and looking at my salary and where I fall on the scale is like, and sometimes I'm just apprehensive to say, and the board is a very kind and sweet and receptive board, right? But I'm apprehensive to go to them and say, this says that 50 percentile is like $70,000 more than I'm making. I want a $70,000 raise, So some are willing to do that. Mostly, I think males, right? But women leaders are like, oh, I don't want to get paid this absorbent amount over my staff. It is a nonprofit. I'm here to give. I love my job. I'm not going to ask for what this paper is saying that I should receive. So it's very convoluted and it's a very difficult thing when you start to talk about salary, but I think particularly for women.
I really appreciate you saying that. First of all, I do believe that you should get a raise. So I'm behind you on getting a raise.
Thank you.
But second of all, it is interesting. So as an employer, as a recruiter, as an employer, you are not allowed to ask for current salary. You cannot ask somebody how much they're currently making. So what we do is we ask, how much do you want to make? What would be your ideal salary? And you're right. There is a striking difference between men and women, and I hate it. And if you had listened to any of our episodes, my friend, you would have heard my friend Kim Peterson and my friend Genevieve, who, by the way, is our only listener, and they talk about their inner Chad. And that inner Chad is a white guy who they channel when they're doing those things. So, you should try and find your inner Chad, your inner white guy, when you are thinking about negotiating. And I wish people would advocate for themselves more.
I agree. I think when I was hired, I did my best to advocate at that point because I wanted to start at a place that I was comfortable with. And I have every confidence in my board because they are professionals that they would just honor the work that I was doing and as far as compensation goes. But I think how you start is very important, right? You don't want to start behind the mark because you're always going to feel like you're catching up. Mm-hmm. So because I start where I thought was reasonable, any other incremental increases, I think is fair and something that I can, more or less live with. But when you get this data that comes in and influences your opinion on it, it can really get you worked up, and I've been there where I'm getting information and I'm constantly taking it to the board, and it just sometimes creates this adversarial kind of relationship. So what I would just recommend, at least make sure you're starting where you want to be so that you don't feel like you're starting behind the mark.
No, 100%. And, being a board member is tough because you're a volunteer and here you have to negotiate salaries for your incoming CEO, executive director. It's not easy, but that's what you need a fantastic consultant for. You are officially the CEO of Pathways LA. And we changed your title, right? Because when we were looking for you, it was executive director, and we changed your title to CEO, right? When you got the job.
Yes, you did.
Which I love that you did that. So tell our listeners, please, about Pathways LA and what you guys do and what sold you to talk to me to take the job.
Thank you for the opportunity. As Pathways LA, we provide subsidized childcare for children in SPA 4, which spans from Eagle Rock to West Hollywood. And we're able to support families when children are as young as 4 months through even after high school with some supplemental activities or whatnot. So we're just here to support children and the childcare providers. We want to make sure that childcare providers are amplified because they're not babysitters. They are there to support children and to support families. They allow families to go out and have the pride of earning and furthering their education to provide for their families academically, enhancing their families, and also bringing in additional revenue. So working with the children, you have to engage with them socially, emotionally, academically, make sure they're ready for school when they start kindergarten. So it's an extremely big responsibility. And our job at Pathways is just to make sure that they're supported, make sure that they're amplified, that our elected officials have them as a priority when we're looking at funding opportunities and ways to impact the infrastructure of Los Angeles County. And also understanding that children who are in childcare, they do better than those who are not when they go into school. They're ready academically and emotionally. They go on to graduate at higher rates. They go on to college at higher rates, and they're higher learners. And so this also impacts the cycle of poverty. So this is very proactive. And everything that I do, I aim to be a proactive person. So to be affiliated with an organization where it has such a proactive approach to ending the cycle of poverty, it's just very important to me. So that's what we do every day in a nutshell, but also looking at the whole family. So we do food distributions, back to school distributions. We promote health and wellness. So we provide bikes and helmets for our children to keep them active and moving. So anytime we can identify a need for our family, we work to make sure that we're able to fulfill that need.
So what you guys do is spectacular. And I want to take a step back because I don't know if people really understand the importance of your organization, but also of organizations like yours and funding for your organization. So when we look at all these signs for employees, right? People can't find staff. There are a lot of people out there who have kids and they can't afford childcare. And without childcare, they can't leave their kids at home and they can't go to work. So a lot of us, probably the majority of us who are listening to this show, have a job and have kids and can afford it. But there's a lot of people who can't. And so can you tell us a little bit about that population? How many people are out there who can't afford to put their kids in childcare?
Right. Many of us, and even those of us who, quote unquote, can afford it, there's a wide range of childcare opportunities. You can have a nanny who comes in, who has a history of helping support families and is very encouraging and supportive, and you can trust leaving your children with that nanny. There is a neighbor who may be home and retired who can, chip in and help raise your child. And so and I say that raise your child because we're leaving our children with childcare providers for 8 to 10 hours a day. This is an extended part of your family. It's a very big responsibility. And so when finances come into the conversation, when you can identify what you would like for your child and you cannot afford that, and you're putting your child in an environment that is not of quality and is not aiding in their growth, it's very disheartening. And we all have to make decisions in our budget. And so many of us, when you say we can afford it, who wants to pay $1,700 a month in childcare expenses, right? It's like, think of the extracurricular activities, the vacations, the college fund, the landscaping, all the things that we can do with that amount of money. So it impacts everyone. And so we have this long care list of families that are waiting because they need assistance with subsidizing childcare for their children. We have a care list now, quote unquote, waiting list of 6,000 children. 6,000. So there are 6,000 children who are in an environment potentially that is not feeding into their growth, feeding into developing them socially and emotionally and encouraging them. So it's just, disheartening to know that. And we're doing the best that we can to engage the families that are on that waiting list, even if we don't have the funding at this time to support them through subsidized care. We have our family engagement component where families can still log on and learn how to engage with their children with activities and things in the household that are low cost. We have stories that represent us, that we have elected officials come on and read stories to our children and to our families, and they get to ask questions about what things that are going on in their neighborhoods, in their schools, things that they'd like to see different. So it's also an opportunity for them to be advocates for themselves. I know this sounds cliche, but children are our future, right? And so when you look at a budget, it tells you what your priorities are. And so when we look at this most recent Inflation Reduction Act that had nothing, absolutely $0 funneled towards childcare or increasing the rates that we are paying our childcare providers or subsidizing childcare, it's just not a priority for our nation right now. And it's very disheartening.
So I think what I would love to do in a second is talk about what people can do to lobby government. But I just want to dive just a little bit deeper. So you said that there are 6,000 children that are on your wait list, and there are other organizations in LA County that do what you do. That's 6,000 kids who really don't have access to childcare. So if I'm one of those 6,000 kids, right, and I don't have access to childcare, what do my parents do? Like or my parent or my caregiver or my guardian, how do they work?
Right. What happens in many of these situations is there is a family unit, right? And so then we rely on family members, on grandma or an auntie or an uncle, or we have a cohort of some sort where we will watch the neighbor's kid and the neighbor watches our kids. And so you do the best you can with building a circle of people that you trust. But it is certainly unpredictable and unstable. And for instance, like some of our workers that are working in, say, the fast food industry, where there has been some work done towards stabilizing their work schedules, but usually they would not know what their work schedules are, say, Sunday, right, for the week. And so it's very hard to organize childcare and make sure that you have someone that has the same flexibility as your work schedule. So those who need it the most, they're just not honored in our economy overall. And so you have this stress on a parent, and then this stress also is then passed on to the child. It's just a stressful environment, just the consideration of them as people in general.
So every single show that I do, every interview that I do, I learn something about how entitled I am, something more about how privileged I am. When you said that about a schedule, that's the first time I ever thought about, hey, like, I know my schedule is weeks in advance, but folks who don't, who may have to work morning shifts or evening shifts and don't know it, how do they plan? I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's very stressful where no one is able to thrive. Everyone is just on this hamster wheel and trying to survive. And so that's what quality childcare does, put a child in a healthy environment. The idea also is that it's a stress-free environment. Of course, managing multiple little personalities is a lot of work, but it should not be stress. But it allows the parent to have the stability they need and the time off that they need to sometimes work. I hate to say this, sometimes work is something that nourishes an adult because you have the ability to interact with other adults. So when you're in a house with a child all day and it's an unstructured environment, it can very quickly become a very stressful environment. But I agree with you. You know, I'm a planner and I too know what my week is, and the few occasions where I think I can't do it today, I have the flexibility to say, hey, I can't do it today, you know, and not everyone has that capacity or ability.
So if I'm a single dad and I have a shift and sometimes it's morning and sometimes it's evening and I don't have anybody to rely on, it's just me and my kid, right? And I have an evening shift, but I don't have anywhere to put my kid. Is that something that Pathways helps with, or are there other services for that?
I'm glad you brought that up. So our resource and referral component, you do not have to be a low-income family. You can be a family in our service area that needs support. And so you can say, I'm looking for providers that provide evening care. Can you give me a list? And we would happily give you a list of providers. And actually, my daughter, who's now 14, when I had her, it was just very daunting to think about childcare. And so I actually used an organization much like Pathways LA, and I called them and said I needed providers in the area where I lived, and they gave me a list. And of course, I went to all of them and said, I didn't like them. Can you give me another list? I think by the third list, I found a center that I thought was good for our family. But, finding a place where you're comfortable with leaving your child is just, it's an emotional decision to make. And so we're there to support anyone in our spa, regardless of what their income may be. We're there to support them in helping make that decision and talk them through that process.
So you guys are funded a lot by government contracts, and we'll talk again about lobbying our governor in a minute. But by being funded by government contracts, are you allowed to support undocumented citizens of California?
Yeah, there's some funding. There's a portion, not a large portion, but certainly a portion that allows us to support undocumented families. And being in Los Angeles County, that is more highly represented here than it may be in any other county or state. And so it's something that we have to be aware of. Ultimately, what we want to do is support all children. So we want every child to be in a safe environment. We want every child to be cared for and every child to be educated, regardless of what their immigration status is. So we do have funding. And when we are lobbying and connecting with our elected officials, we do make it a point to let them know that we're here for all children, regardless of what their backgrounds may be.
So can I ask you a stupid question?
Sure.
If it's too stupid, Ashley will take it out. Is there enough childcare for all the kids who need it?
That's a good question. And it's not a stupid question, because right now it is very difficult to recruit childcare professionals to this field. They are historically underpaid. I think they're actually the most underpaid professional field or sector out there. And so it's hard to convince someone and to become a teacher, if you will, or have a licensed childcare facility. It is required that you take some college courses. And so when you look at those who will go to college, which is a sacrifice, right? So you are investing in yourself for the long term, but you have to get yourself centered and focused to go to class, to write a paper, to do these assignments. A lot of work. It was a very difficult time for me. And I have a master's. It was just a lot of time management, right? So the people who are going to do that, they're going to keep going, right? It's like, I'm not going to stop at a job where the reimbursement rate, when you look at the time spent, when I have to pay out of money for supplies, that I'm not even getting paid minimum wage. If you have the wherewithal to get in such a structure and thrive, you're going to keep going. And so we are asking people to go to school, get college credits to come and be paid below minimum wage. So it's very difficult at this time to recruit providers into the field. When the pandemic happened, we lost about 30% of our providers. Jeez. And so you have 30% of the providers leaving the field. You have this increased need. And so that's when we start to talk about the government's responsibility for bridging the gap. Make our childcare system whole, to make sure our providers are honored and paid fairly, to make sure that every child that parent would like them to be in a childcare setting, that they have that ability. It should be a right, like public school is a right. So right now is a very interesting time. The pandemic really highlighted the importance of childcare as we supported essential workers by providing care. When many of us were home, afraid to leave the house, childcare providers were still there to care for children whose parents were going to work. So it's just a very interesting time right now in the field. It's a crisis, and we're doing the best that we can to shift and to make sure that we continue to amplify early childhood education and the importance of it.
What is so sad for me to hear about all this is that, first of all, there aren't enough staff to take care of our kids, period. And they don't get paid anything. First of all, going to college is a privilege. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody can afford it. Forget about having the time. And so we're forcing childcare workers to take college courses to then go get a job that pays minimum wage. And these are the people taking care of our kids when they need it the most.
Yes, absolutely. When I go on Tuesdays at my house, we have hamburger night. So we go to In-N-Out. And I watch what In-N-Out pays their workers go up. I feel like it's every day because I'm just sensitive to it because I'm an advocate for our providers. And so right now, I think they're paying close to $19 with benefits. So just recently was there legislation passed here in California that we will assist childcare providers, that will assist childcare providers with obtaining health benefits. Just into this year, was that even a consideration, right? Really, where we are headed towards is the retired neighbor or someone who doesn't necessarily need the income for their livelihood, but wants supplemental income. But, what's important is that the professionals that are caring for children have a passion for it and understand the magnitude of caring for children. And again, going back to this is not babysitting, you are impacting someone's life and the relationships that they develop with adults early on impacts their life long term. And so it's a very big responsibility, and we don't want to reduce the field to it just being the retired neighbor.
So let's talk about what we can do. So as an LA resident, and I don't have children, but I would fight for this. So if there aren't enough workers to take care of our kids and they don't get paid enough, and the expectation is that they take college courses, which to me is bullshit, what can I do to fix that?
What I would recommend doing is connecting with organizations like Pathways, because we do often have advocacy days and months and weeks where we're calling on our supporters and just the community at large to help us engage elected officials and let them know the importance of early childhood education. And so as many of us who can make those phone calls or engage with elected officials, it just makes sure that they understand that it is of importance. And so we take on the responsibility of giving you the phone number to call, saying, sign this letter. So we will guide the ship, if you will. We just want to have more people on board with us who are supporters of our children and our providers.
Okay, so you've heard it here first. We need to do more for our childcare providers, which is crazy to me because, for me, I just thought about the fact that you needed to raise the money to pay childcare supporters to take care of these kids, but it's so much more than that. Okay, so I want to know, Tamika, why in the world do you want to be a CEO of a nonprofit?
That's an awesome question. And, I always say leadership is not for punks.
Wait. I'm going to tell you something that's going to make Ashley so happy. The title of this episode is going to be Leadership is Not for Punks. I'm telling you that right now.
All right. I love it. Leadership is not for punks, because you really have to be grounded and to be able to take the full responsibility. I take the full responsibility for my staff, for the financial security of our organization, for the support of 4,000 children and 1,500 providers. I know that in everything that I do, I'm going to give 100% of who I am and all the skills that I have and all of the successes I've had and all the failures that I had, that I'm showing up with all of that and giving 100% of that to lead. And so you just have to be able to take a calculated risk and bet on yourself. And really, that's what leadership is.
So what's your favorite thing about being a CEO?
My favorite thing, a nonprofit CEO, right? So knowing that the work that I am doing is having an impact on those who need our services. So first and foremost, that is what drives me. So my passion, and sometimes pushing numbers, if you will, like these numbers are people. When we look at these numbers, these are people. When we look at these numbers, these are services. So I feel very much empowered to press and lead in a way with some passion, because it's for those families that need our support.
The thing that made it challenging for me when I was an executive director was that I was in an office in a building, and I wasn't actually in the shelter, and I wasn't actually seeing our kids, and I wasn't actually seeing us make an impact. I know where your office is. I know that you're not there every day, right? You're not with the kids every day. So as a nonprofit CEO, how do you stay connected to the clients, to the families? How do you see them? How do you continue to know what you're doing?
Yeah, they have now transitioned to drive-through events, which before would be community events, but now families are driving through, taking pictures as the car moves through. We're throwing things in their trunk, but I make sure I attend those events. We also hold provider town halls via Zoom, which actually makes it easier. You don't get the same feel, of course, when you have the opportunity and the privilege to be present with them, but it's easier to gather sometimes via Zoom. It's just more accessible. So I do log on to our provider town halls and hear about some of the issues and make sure that I'm representing them and that I'm not making any assumptions on what their needs are and how I want to support them. I want to hear from them firsthand about how they want to be supported. And we're actually also starting to incorporate our providers into our advocacy days with elected officials, because it's just important to hear directly from them. They are the ones who are providing the care, and they are the ones who are making sure that children are taken care of. So I do everything I can to make sure that we hear from them directly.
Okay, so I have a wartime story, but I want yours first. What is like your favorite, I don't know, story of like a termination or like a client or like somebody showing up to work drunk? I don't know. What is your favorite wartime story example without throwing the person under the bus? And then I'll give you mine.
Yeah. Gosh, I have a lot of them. And I don't know if I'm sure if I had time to think about it, I could really come up with some good ones. But I just think back to this particular employee posted a picture with her and her staff with her private practice. And it was like all of the staff that she manages at our organization. So she had shifted all of her staff that she works with at that organization to her private practice. I couldn't believe it. And she was juggling so much. She had a team at that organization. She had a private practice with, I think, about 15 of our employees. And she had 5 children. And so in management meetings, she could not stay awake. It's like every time I see this woman, she sleeps. So yeah, I had to tell her, you have to make a decision. Our staff cannot work for you because I don't know when you're meeting with them at our job. Are you meeting about your personal work? Or are you meeting about the work here? And so she ended up leaving the organization because she had built a pretty good private practice. Like we were her side job. So yeah, I was just totally tickled by that.
I'm going to tell you my story, which is my ultimate favorite story. I had an employee that we had to let go. And our building, we were on the 3rd floor of a house. So we were in an attic. And we let him go. And he went into his office and freaked out and started throwing things, right? And he had these glass picture frames. And he threw the picture frames. And of course, they broke. So he went to my HR person. He was like, is this what you think of me? Let me show you what I think of you. And he took the glass and he stabbed his wrists and started bleeding, and then threw himself down the stairs, got into his car to leave. And we had to call the cops on him, right? Because that's not great. And then they found him like a few blocks away, like bleeding in his car. And they brought him to the hospital, and he was on mandatory watch in the hospital for 3 days.
That is traumatic. That's crazy, Matt. I think I would have had to go on stress leave after that. Or I would have been afraid to fire anyone else after that. That's craziness.
It can't get worse. Like when I left the organization, there was still bloodstains on the carpet where he threw himself down the stairs. So like, yes, you can terminate somebody and it could be bad, but like, I don't believe it can get worse than that.
I just have not had to terminate a lot of people in my career. What I do is coach them to the point that they decide to leave. Right. And so that's good. Like they have the opportunity, they'll see the writing on the wall per se, and then they can shift to an environment that is better for them. And it's a win-win for everyone. So that's what I do. I just kind of try to continue to hold them accountable to where they decide, no, thank you.
You are a better person than I am. When I've like had enough, I've had enough. But if I never have to fire somebody again, I won't be upset about it at all. So a few follow-up questions for our listeners out there who want to get into nonprofit. The first question for you is, why in the world are you in nonprofit?
You know what's so funny. I am where I'm supposed to be. I didn't even understand the magnitude of the world, and I thought everybody worked in nonprofit until I got to college and I realized, oh, there's a whole new world. There's people in accounting, there's people in marketing, and I had no idea. Growing up in the inner city, what I saw was, of course, the public education system. I saw police officer, I saw judge, I saw social workers, I saw the opportunities that my mom had to access in order to support our family. So in my narrow exposure to things, this is what I was aware of, but I do understand how it impacted me and how it impacted my family. And so I thought that anyone who had the opportunity would do the same thing, right? But then I later learned, there's a plethora of things people can do in the world. But again, the impact always is a driver for me, and just knowing that the smallest things, it could be a distribution of food during Thanksgiving where there could have possibly not been a Thanksgiving. It could be giving kids toys during the holidays where they possibly could have had no toys, or just supporting families. Again, the childcare piece is just so huge, it's so proactive and so impactful. In everything that I do and in my nonprofit work, I am led by understanding the impact that it's having on families, no matter how small the thing that we're doing.
So if I'm listening to this show and I'm in college and I'm you in college, and I think to myself, how in the world do I get into nonprofit? How in the world do I do what I need to do to become a CEO of a nonprofit, right? To become you. What advice do you give me?
Certainly, in every CEO position, executive director position I have interviewed for or obtained, the board has been looking for someone who's not afraid to fundraise. So I would encourage someone to diversify their skill sets in the nonprofit sector. So get to know the program side, because you want to be able to speak firsthand about the services and understand the impact, see the impact, breathe it, inhale it, understand it, and then put yourself on the track administratively so that you have the skill sets to impact it. So the development opportunities allows you to interact with the board, which many times the program staff may not have that access. So you can interact with the board, you can go to fundraisers, you can speak with donors, you can go to community events, engage with elected officials. All of these things will be very important when you're leading an organization. And so don't ever take any small step for granted. It's all a stepping stone to where you're going. Even if you don't understand long-term how this is going to impact your life, it certainly comes full circle. And so just take every step and embrace every moment, every struggle, every failure, because it is building you to the leader that you need to be.
I love that you said that, and I 1,000% agree with you. Fundraising is key. You got to know how to fundraise, and I think people are afraid to ask for money. And so if you are listening to this show and you want to be Tamika one day, like, you got to go out and fundraise, find a nonprofit, volunteer, ask for money, get used to it, because that's important. Because if you can't sell the organization, you certainly can't sell yourself. And you got to be able to sell yourself to be in charge. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's so many creative ways to fundraising these days than back in the day where it was, either just a direct ask or a special event. You can just be so creative today with how you engage. And fundraising also is about engagement, right? And so really you should take the time, research and know what you are getting yourself into so that you can just create the best learning environment and growth environment for yourself.
So I'm going to go back to what I had talked to you about earlier. And then I have one last question for you after this, and then we'll let our listener go. So in terms of what we can do in terms of living in California or any state really in the country, what can we do? How do we lobby our government to get better childcare for our families who need it?
You can do something as simple as make a phone call. You can also not feel shy about wanting to meet with them. If you see them at community events, if you're engaged in that way, feel free to have a conversation with them. They have been elected to represent us. They work for us. Many times, when elected officials are running for office. They're very humble. They want to talk to everyone. And then once they're in office, now they become these celebrities, but they are there to work for us. And so it's okay to have the perspective that you're there to hold them accountable for being responsive. Like, we have an issue, we have a crisis. I want to know what you're doing about it. What can we do to support our families? Can we have a town hall? Can we bring resources to them? Can we develop some sort of co-op, like to push them to come up with some solutions, even if it's just locally?
Okay. And one last question, as I promised. You talked about fundraising. It was really important. Why should somebody give to Pathways LA?
As I said earlier, we are proactive in what we're doing. Investing in us is investing in children and investing in their futures. We're very dedicated to making sure that children have a pathway to success.
That's awesome. Well, Tamika, I so appreciate you being on this show. I hope that you listen to one of our episodes, if not just your own. And on that note, is there anything else that you would like to leave with our listener that I did not ask you before I let you go for the evening?
I just would like to reiterate that I love Pathways LA. And I'm always so thankful and so grateful to be at this organization that has such an important mission with such passionate staff. And so I just want to give a shout out to Pathways and the Pathways team for all the great work that they're doing.
Thank you for being such an awesome leader, by the way. You really are an extraordinary leader. You're spectacular. So thank you for doing what you do for the nonprofit sector. We're very lucky to have you. And I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Take care, Matt.
Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Matt.
So what did you think?
Oh, I thought we talked about this. I didn't get a chance to actually listen to Tamika's episode because the puppy, Matt, every 5 seconds, the puppy needed either to go out or to stop chewing on my furniture. So yeah, I didn't exactly get around. I'm sure it was great. She sounds great.
Kim Peterson from season 2 really wants to be the producer of this show. So Kim, if you're listening out there, I think it's time.
I'm editing that out. Kim Peterson, you may not have my job. Puppy will grow up, Matt. The puppy will grow up.
The puppy will grow up, but it's going to be like a good year. And what about this show, Ashley? What about this show?
Matt, I have a plan, okay? And the plan is plastic coating on furniture. Remember the type that your grandmother had that like it looked like the furniture just came out of the box? I'm going to do that on everything that we own.
Here's my question, Ashley. Do you have friends that come over to your house?
Yes, because everybody wants to see this damn puppy because it's so cute. So I have friends I didn't even know I had. Like, I didn't think I had friends, and then I got a puppy. So that's why like guys often get puppies, because they can get, partners, because people stop them all the time. Yeah. I get it now. I really do.
So if anybody sees Ashley walking her puppy, just walk the other way because she's just trying to get friends.
Matt, stop it. You're ruining my gambit. This is my only way to win friends and gain influence.
But, thinking truly about the plastic thing, I am a little OCD kind of crazy.
Like the kind of OCD that vacuums the countertops? OCD?
Like the kind of OCD that vacuums the countertops, sure.
And by the way, is that a dust buster? Because I've done that before for crumbs. You're not like with a full standing vac.
No, because it's gross. It cleans up the floor. No. I have a dust buster for the counters because it's not dirty. Anyway, but my point is, I love the idea of plastic on furniture. I'm all about plastic on the furniture. And unless the Queen or King of England comes to visit, you leave that on. That's my opinion.
Queen of England, God rest her soul, just passed away.
I know. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't really care about the royalty until The Crown. And now, I am all about it. And it's such a bummer.
I wonder how many people had that same exact story. Didn't care about the royal family, didn't really know anything. It was all the way across the pond. Started watching The Crown because they heard all the buzz. And now they care, and now they're sad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants Charles to be in charge.
That's true. Charles in charge.
I heard it. I heard it the minute I said it. I heard it the minute I said it. And there's the question: who was Charles in Charge? Wasn't it Chachi?
Yeah, it was Chachi, Scott Baio.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's turned into like a total right-wing wackadoo. But he was cute back in the 70s and 80s.
Well, on that note of Chachi and Charles in Charge and the Queen's passing, is there anything else, Ashley, that you would like to leave with Genevieve before we let her tune off?
She's the only one listening to this totally nonsensical rant now. Genevieve, you were with us though, right? Like you transitioned, Genevieve. I know you did. All the way from puppy care to plastic coating on the furniture to the Queen dying to Chachi. You were there. Matt, I hope everyone listens to our next episode. Do you want to tell everyone who we have coming up next?
I do. I'm very excited about it. Our next episode is with Edward Amy, who is the CEO of Jane Nolan, which is a phenomenal organization in the Valley of LA working with developmentally disabled adults.
Awesome. All right, everyone. You can find us on our social accounts. Of course, the Instagram account with all the underscores, nonprofit _ the _ rocks. Please don't forget to subscribe and like us.